Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Conflict Synopsis channel, where we'll be covering the Russian-Ukrainian conflict up until this point, alongside recent developments within the last 24 to 48 hours. Now, with regard to this channel, not only do we provide summarizations of the conflict, but we also will be giving analysis, my analysis, with regards to Russian-Ukrainian movement, possible movements, and etc. Today is September 10th, 2024, and with that being said, let's get started. Starting off with the Kherson region, we see Russia progressing towards the Dnipro River with regards to two spots. With the first spot being the corner of this isle, we have received geolocation confirming Russian presence here, alongside geolocation confirming sighting of Russian soldiers on the Ukrainian side of the river. Now, with the Russian sighting on the Ukrainian side of this river, this most likely is nothing but a reconnaissance force because unless Russia was willing to invest heavy resources towards launching a full frontal assault, it is very unlikely that Russia would have soldiers bunker down in this region just because it's illogical and there's no foothold. For as you see these three settlements, between these three settlements and the Dnipro River, there is nothing but open air. So it would be highly unlikely that Russia would send actual forces to bunker down and hold here because it would result in nothing but death. Unless Russia wanted to, launch a full blitz attack, and that would require pontoon bridges and something similar. And we haven't received any reports of that, so it's safe to assume that this is simply reconnaissance forces. Now, heading a little bit more east up the Dnipro River, we also have seen Russian soldiers geolocation confirming that they have established a foothold on this part of Dnipro River, this part being south of Tokarivka and north of Kozachi Lahiri. Here, as you may see through the geolocated video, we see Russian forces being hit with a Ukrainian drone which is launching thermite on their positions. Now, this video has been geolocated to this point, and we can assume that Russia does have some sort of initiative or some sort of desire to control their part of Dnipro River. Why? Because Russia has not only initiated two assaults towards these two positions that we just referenced, but furthermore, logically speaking, it would be smart for Russia to capture all, and if not all of their side of Dnipro River, at least chunks and patches. Why? Because from a strategic standpoint, having control over your side, or in this case the Russian side of Dnipro River, it would allow for eventually, if planned, an assault on Ukrainian side. But not only that, if Russia, say, doesn't desire to do this right now and is preoccupied with other parts of Ukraine, at least by occupying chunks and portions like we see here, at least by doing that, it threatens the possibility of an invasion. And with the threat of a possibility of an invasion, that forces Ukraine to garrison soldiers and that forces Ukraine to be on their toes with regards to these regions. Now, in terms of Kherson region, that's all we have for now. Heading more eastwards, we're going to go towards Robotny. Robotny is the same as it has been for a while now, with both sides clashing for this disputed territory and neither side throwing enough at each other to occupy it. Furthermore, we also see the same thing occurring over here in Staromayorsky. Staromayorsky is suffering the same fate as Robotny. Both sides not directly at a standstill, but both sides struggling to gain a foothold with regards to the contested regions. Furthermore, heading more eastwards, we have received reports from not only the Russian Minister of Defense, but pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian, and neutral sources stating Russian occupation of Vodyane. Now, this is not only confirmed by these reports, but we also, as you may see by the picture here, that Russia has soldiers on the ground currently occupying it. Now, with that being said, Russia currently is fighting for not only this coal mine, but is trying to fight for the third coal mine, with these two coal mines being heavily important to Ukraine. For if the Ukraine decides to collapse with regards to this line, and particularly even this coal mine, and if Russian soldiers begin moving westwards, Not only would this be horrible for the coal mine that's to the south of it, but this would also jeopardize Voledar. For an encirclement here by default would collapse this defense belt that we see here. The threat of encirclement. Now, Ukraine so far has done an okay job holding. However, Russia, alarmingly for Ukraine, has progressed rapidly with regards to this region than it has within, we'll say, for the last month. For Russia recently activated such movements, such desire to capture at such a larger and quicker pace. About a week ago, Russian forces maybe could have been said to be around this line. And now Russian soldiers not only have captured Vodyane, but are showing an initiative towards this coal mine alongside this one. So that is Vodyane, and moving more northwards, we've received reports last night that Russian soldiers have managed to capture the western part of Krasnohorovka. The western part of Krasnohorovka is crucial for Russia to capture, and it is unfortunate for Ukraine to lose. Why? Because from here now Russia has the operational space to begin to conduct a series of FPV drones or even begin to approach and advance towards this defense belt. This, how we have known through reports for the last week that Russia has desired to create a pocket and encirclement of soldiers located here. Russia initially tried within the last week to penetrate these two settlements and move southward alongside move westward from Krasnohorovka. But what to this point has stopped Russia from moving westward was this little Ukrainian pocket. But now that that's gone, there is nothing except fields in the way of Russia from moving westwards. However, with regards to Russia moving southwards, that it proves to be a whole different entire case. Why? Because that isn't simply a case of, as we see in Krasnohorovka, of Russia not simply having the territory. This has been a case as in Russia cannot penetrate this defense wall because Ukraine has put up a sufficient defense. Now, it could be safe to say that Russia, with regards to here, has shown no more of an initiative or a desire to want to move southwards. We haven't received any more reports since Russia's initial attempts in capturing these villages. However, no country, especially in war, no country in war would ever skip the desire for encirclement. So the card is still on the table, but right now we are not seeing any Russian desire for that. We are seeing just a slow and steady and continuous Russian expansion from Krasnohorovka to the west, and with regards to this region of Novohrodovka and Sildova towards the west. Both sides move towards the west. For if Russia moves towards the west towards Sildova and alongside Ukrainsk and then eventually Tsukorne, eventually alongside if they are met by Russian advance from Krasnohorovka towards Vovchenka, eventually this will collapse by default. So that's where Russian movements are with regards to today and the last few days. And now focusing on this region that we just talked about, Mkhailovka and Sildova, Russian forces have shown to capture through geolocation Maranivka. Now, in terms of this landfill, where it is still disputed and it is unknown who controls it, with pro-Russian sources claiming Russia and pro-Ukrainian sources disputing it. See, the situation of Sildova is a little bit more complicated, right? Because initially everyone believed Russia to be absolutely steamrolling through Sildova, with it having believed that Russia controlled the central and southern part of Sildova. But recently, through geolocation, that has proven to not be true. So as a result, most mappers and basically every mapper has readjusted their maps to show as you are seeing accordingly. Now, Russia needs to possess this if they want to eventually pursue going further west. In terms of Ukraine, Ukraine has done a great job in stabilizing the lines. And we know that Ukraine helped stabilize these lines in this Avdiivka, Sildava, Petrovsk region through sending soldiers from the Kursk direction, relocating them here to stabilize the line, right? Because when it comes to this direction, Russia we have seen Russian soldiers move the most rapidly we have seen since the lines first became almost stagnant since the beginning of the war, right? About maybe a month ago, Russia was at the right outside of Divka. Within a month, Russia has managed to take everything that you see so far. And for Ukraine, that's alarming. But Ukraine decided not to at first try to contain this, but they decided to launch their own attack, and that was the attack into the Kursk region. With that, with that, it was basically almost like a gambit. It was thought to believe that either Russia would commit to their advance towards Petrovsk, or Russia would relocate soldiers and try to contain these lines. However, Russia decided to do the former of the options. It decided to continue towards Petrovsk, and Ukraine's hand was forced. But in terms of Russia's advance now, Russia's making slow advances, and Ukraine has stabilized the lines. Good for Ukraine. And Russia still, however, can be said to have an initiative here. Now, moving alongside, we are going to now approach New York and the Toretsk region. In terms of New York, Ukrainians have retaken the high-rise buildings and the surrounding buffer zone, we'll say. Now, for a long time, it was thought that Russians occupied this because for a while it was reported that Russia had occupied the high-rise buildings alongside up to the point that you see drawn here. However, when mappers and analysts began to see that Russia was not moving north and had remained stagnant at this line, questions were begun to become asked, and furthermore, reports eventually came along saying that first Ukrainians were still trapped in their high-rise buildings, encircled and fighting. Then news came saying that not only were Ukrainians trapped there, but now in fact Ukraine has seized all the land that you see here. Now, whether the Russians encircled this pocket at first, or maybe had it close to encirclement, that's besides the point. Regardless, Ukraine has managed to open this area up again and is holding at the high-rise buildings. For the high-rise buildings controls all of New York. From here, you have access and direct gun sight towards all of central and western New York. Now, in terms of west of Yorovka, Russians were reported to have advanced towards these hedgerows. However, it seems most likely that Russia will not continue to focus on advancing towards these settlements, besides first establishing control over the high-rise buildings. It would be safe to assume that's priority number one because the last thing you would want if you were Russians and the Russian soldiers is to get encircled and to get flanked from this side of New York while you're heading towards west. Because although Russia has been progressing and has been the attackers throughout the majority of this war, people tend to forget that Ukraine also possesses the ability to counterattack, to create encirclements, create entrapments. And so that's why Russia has adopted a more slow policy, a policy that takes a slower approach and yields to less casualties, right? We've seen this throughout the course of this conflict. So, in terms of Toretsk, Russians have advanced and have seized this pocket of Toretsk that you see, right? And shown in the picture here, we see Russian soldiers present in this area. And furthermore, geolocation does confirm that Russians have also seized these two blocks of Toretsk. Now, moving more northwards, we also are going to end up going towards Ivanivska and Chesev Yar. With regards to Ivanivska, there's clashes to the west of Ivanivska. Russians trying to possess their side of the canal, which they managed to do recently west of Klishivka. Now, furthermore, in terms of Chesev Yar, Russians are making a slow advancement, with recent reports showing and geolocation confirming Russian presence on this part of Ukrainian side of the canal. See, Chasiv Yar has the battle for Chasiv Yar has been going on for months now, and Russians seem to barely be making progress here, which only it leads me to believe that perhaps Russian soldiers or there's not such a Russian focus on this part of the combat contact, the line of combat contact. So Ukraine, however, must be given credit for that they have done a good job in slowing the Russian advance on their side of the canal, with this part of Chasiv Yar being contested ground. Now, previously, it was said to believe that perhaps Russians were making an advance more towards north. However, based off geolocations and based off current location where FPV droning is occurring, this seems to be a little bit too rash of a judgment. But just a little bit above Kalinina, we see that Russian forces managed to capture this hedgerow and this forest, securing a more stable line, a more straight front, right? It's always good for soldiers and it's always good for armies to create a more narrow front because that releases soldiers which can be used in other areas. Now, just as I'm recording this video, we see that the Russian Minister of Defense reported Russian control over Khyrovka, which no one really expected that Russian forces were had seized this yet, but this report came out of the blue, and so this part of the map has been colored. Now this has been thought to believe one of the possible strategies that Russia could take with regard to Chasiv Yar. Because the central part of Chasiv Yar has proven to be a tough nut to crack, Russians perhaps may want to approach Chasiv Yar from the north and perhaps from the south. And so we have seen correspondingly Russian movements in such areas. Like as I stated, we see that Russians have been more and more active in trying to seize their part of the canal in terms of the southern part of Chasiv Yar. And furthermore, we also recently received Russian reports and Russian geolocation showing Russia advancing also towards their side of the canal with regards to north of Chasiv Yar, with them having seized Herohorivka. So let's head more north. More north, we also received reports that, and through geolocation, that Russians have seized in terms of the northern part of Zalesnyansky, this forest alongside this hedgerow. Furthermore, we also see them having seized these four hedgerows located here. And Russian movement is still occurring towards, and with disputed regions going to having to be occurring towards the west, east, and north. Furthermore, heading more north, we're going to go back towards this landfill. This landfill, south of Bilohorivka, Russia has spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears trying to take. Ukrainians have found a great position, a great stronghold which they can bunker down in. The Ukrainians have done an absolute magnificent job of halting Russians here. And Russians, as a result, have been spending a lot of time, months now, trying to crack this stronghold. Without having taken these strongholds, Russians cannot look towards moving more westwards because this stronghold this landfill provides such a great and advantageous position for Ukrainian soldiers. It would be unwise for Russia to circumnavigate it with regards to these routes unless Russia was to create an encirclement. Unless create an encirclement here, but that has proven to be tricky because this landfill allows the Ukrainians to see everything, every movement with regards to its flanks. So Russia is gonna it seems as if according to the pace right now, Russia is going to need more time towards trying to take this. Heading more northwards, we also see reports coming in that Russia has seized the central part of Makivka, the part that spans their side of Zirbet River. Furthermore, as we see here, we also have geolocation confirming Russian presence alongside this hedgerow. And this is going to be seen in this video right here, which came in the morning. We see once again a Ukrainian drone, like we saw in the Kherson region, dropping thermite along Russian positions. Yeah. Now that's going to be it for Makivka. And with regards to the Eastern Front, we're gonna it's gonna end off on Pishani. Pishani, Russians have begun to mobilize and head towards the west, towards Oskol River. Russian forces, through geolocation, have seized this pocket and are moving towards expanding their control. Now, in terms of the Eastern Front, that's about it. And with regards to Oskol River, it would be wise for Russia to take this because once Russia takes this river, takes this side of the river and all these settlements that are alongside this river, Russia can either begin to make an advance west, or if they please, they could choose to bunker in and focus on other fronts. Why? Because the river serves as a great natural geographical barrier, right? Russia, for the last few months, has been pounding the bridges on this river towards trying to destroy Ukrainian logistics and supplying this defense belt. Russia seizing this defense belt would mean Russia does not need to allocate as much attention towards this part of the region as it may need in other areas. So in terms of the Eastern Front, that's about it. Now we're going to head towards the Kharkiv region where Russia is basically put at a standstill right now by Ukrainian soldiers. Russia has not shown a desire to advance more southwards with regards to Lipsi, but has decided to go take a more defensive mentality and bunker down in Heleboke. Ukrainians, on the other hand, have shown a desire to counterattack and have in the past done successful counterattacks only to be once again pushed back by Russian soldiers. But it seems that Russian intention in this region was never to make a deep advance towards Kharkiv, right? Because it seems more that Russia has desired this pocket, this little incursion, to be more as a distraction of resources and of soldiers on behalf of the Ukrainian side. And the same can be said towards Vovchansk. However, with Vovchansk, Russia has been trying to seize their side of the river, right? And this spans these buildings. Ukraine has put up a great defense in this area, still controlling the southern part of the citadel, which is located here, right? And until Russians seize that part of the citadel, it'll be extremely difficult for Russia to advance. Now, with regards to this front, that's also all the news that we have for now. However, as the time I'm recording this video, we have received recent reports from the Kursk front that Russia is launching and the Russian soldiers are launching a counterattack with regards to this line, Snagos being, we could say, the border of this frontal assault. So it seems that in this region, and this has been proven from the last week, Ukraine has shown little advancement with regards to Kursk. Now, the reason is not because of a lack of capabilities with regards to the number of Ukrainian soldiers here or skill, but the fact that Western countries have not allowed Ukrainians to use their weapons deep in the territory of Russia. And this poses a problem because Ukraine only makes a limited amount of their own weaponry. They rely on Western weapon and Western support. So Ukraine perhaps thought that by initially launching this attack and this invasion, that although at the time they were not granted Western support even at that time, perhaps by seeing the initial success, Western countries would eventually give them the okay. However, up until this point, that has proven not to be true, and so Ukraine has come to a halt almost, and Russians have begun launching counteroffensives. With reports coming also Russian soldiers perhaps infiltrating this pocket. And furthermore, Russian soldiers are also fighting for this contested ground alongside this southern part of Kursk, the villages of Kurlovka and Fanasivka. Now, With regards to the Axis Western weapons, now moving on to the political news that recently have broke. Recently, we got word that because Iran has sent a shipment of long-range missiles to Russia for the use of being used in Ukraine. As a result, Joe Biden is meeting with the Prime Minister of Britain to discuss allowing Ukrainians to use their Western weapons in response. And this is shown on the screen right here, the articles covering this. Now, if Ukraine wanted to have any success in the Kursk region, Ukraine would need this authorization, plain and simple. Although Ukraine has some of their best soldiers and battalions stationed here, this is not enough without their capability and their ability to hit Russian convoys from afar, right? Because that means Russia right now, as it stands, can begin to amass soldiers deep within their territory and prepare convoys to head towards Ukraine. And if Ukraine can't counter that, I mean, if they can only hit them right when they're at their doorstep, it'll prove to be so difficult for them. And it has proven to be difficult for them. Hence why we see little gain from the Ukrainian side since their initial expansion. Now, with that being said, that is all for today with regards to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. And as always, if you have enjoyed, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. And I want to hear what your guys' thoughts on the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is. And as always, have a great and blessed day. Thank you.